Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to get started as close to time as possible, so if you could find your refreshments and find a seat, we'll get underway very shortly. So please find your cup of coffee and a seat. Thanks. We'll be starting in a moment.
That's 544.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the inaugural Student Success Seminar and 2020 Innovation Challenge. Please welcome to the stage Student Regent and Student Government Association President Jarrett Lopez and Student Hannah Edlin.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Jarrett Lopez, the SGA President and member of the Board of Regents. I'm joined on stage with fellow student Hannah Edlin, Presidential Fellow with the Office of the President. We are so excited you have joined us for an eventful morning. So why don't we get started? We are going to begin the summit with an activity that will involve everyone in this ballroom. I ask that you please direct your attention to the screens. From New Student Convocation, in which we engage the students in a unique Q&A. Similar to our first-year students at New Student Convocation, I would like everyone in attendance to pull out your phone because we are going to engage you in a similar activity. I want you to now turn on the flashlight on your phone. So, Once you do that, what Hannah and I are going to do is read a series of statements to you. If you agree with the statement, I want you to hold your phone up with the flash pointing to the camera above the flags to my right, your left. If you disagree with the statement, just leave the phone pointing down. After each statement, you're going to be able to see the entire ballroom's response on the screens. Make sense? Perfect. So let's try an example. If I were to read, "You are sitting in the Student Union Ballroom," your response would be, awesome. Everyone's phone should be up. All right, are we ready? If so, let's begin.
I am, was, or will be the first person in my family to attend college. You share good company, as approximately 50% of NKU students are first generation. I am happy to see the students back on campus, but admit that I miss my parking spot closer to my office when students are on break. Good, we were checking to see if you were going to be honest with us this morning. I started my college journey as an adult learner here, a part-time learner, and/or as a parent. Adult and part-time learners continue to be NKU's fastest growing populations, with 34% of NKU students being 25 or older and 39% of students being enrolled as part-time. NKU makes it easy for community college students to transfer. NKU continues to grow pathways and agreements with regional institutions, as 15% of students are transfer students at NKU. I am a proud alum of NKU. Wow, we've got several here. And nearly 1,300 new graduates joined you at the fall commencement last December. In total, there are over 65,000 living alumni worldwide.
I had an educator that I still remember to this day for having a positive impact on who I am today. Which is why every interaction you have with a student may be more impactful than you think. You literally make a difference in the lives of your students, just like the mentors and champions you had during your educational journey. NKU offers a coordinated academic, social, and financial support system so low-income students can succeed. Nearly 4 out of 10 NKU students is a Pell recipient. We all know how it feels when you hit a barrier or don't feel supported, which is why it's on all of us to help remove these obstacles for students and provide a comprehensive, coordinated approach to student success. Within the last year, I collaborated or partnered with a department outside of my own to advocate for student success. And this is only going to grow. Success by Design calls for all of us to work collaboratively together in a coordinated care approach to support the students through their journey to graduation. I impact student success and make a difference in our students' lives. Everyone's flashlight should be up. Whether you're meeting directly with students or behind the scenes making sure campus is running, you each impact students in an amazing way. I commit to making every NKU student feel like they belong here. As the current SGA president, and on behalf of the prior SGA president, Hannah and I would like to offer our sincere thanks for everything you do to support us and all the students who call NKU home. Your attendance here today, as well as those viewing online, demonstrates your commitment to these students. Thank you. It is now my honor to welcome to the stage President Ashish Vaidya.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jared, and thank you, Hannah, for that inspiring activity. I have to admit, I needed a few minutes to figure out how to turn my flashlight off before I came up here. But anyway, what a great way to begin. As we saw from that exercise, there were a couple of questions that we didn't all sort of raise our lights to, and so we know we have some work ahead of us. But what a great way to begin this event, this inaugural summit. Good morning and welcome to the start of the spring semester and actually a new decade. Isn't that amazing? It is wonderful to see all of you here in the H. Gordon and Thelma S. Ballroom. We just had the dedication earlier this week, so we are grateful that you could take some time from this morning to be here as well. We're here to begin a new tradition at NKU, a Student Success Summit to start the spring semester. How about that for a classic alliteration? In all seriousness, though, we have come a long way since we launched our strategic framework in the fall of 2018, and I couldn't be more pleased with where we are right now. These past 18 months, we have developed, adapted, and have begun implementation of Success by Design, a singular focus on advancing student success aligned with the needs of the region. And we did it with input and involvement from all of you. Even while the framework was being developed and initiatives were being prioritized, your commitment to supporting students was evident throughout the university. Whether it was engaging students in the classroom or outside, in dispersing microgrants to those facing financial difficulties, or helping stock our amazing Kroger Fuel NKU food pantry. Whether you were hard at work right through the holidays, getting end-of-the-year scholarship gifts, or working tirelessly to make the campus look and feel beautiful, you were making a difference in our students' lives. I'm inspired by your passion to see our students succeed. That brings us to today and our inaugural Student Success Summit and the 2020 Innovation Challenge. I am really thrilled that we had 133 proposals for the Innovation Challenge. I've always maintained that great ideas to advance student success can come from anywhere on campus. All we have to do is to create an environment where everyone on campus feels empowered as an educator. And you have clearly shown that. My hope is that today we're inspired even more by the panel discussion and then by the innovation presentations to further commit to our vision of becoming a student-ready, regionally engaged university that empowers diverse learners for economic and social mobility. Again, I want to thank all of you for being here, and let's get the panel discussion underway. I want to welcome Bridget Ramsey, Dr. Anton Rees, and Dr. Kristen Turner, and Ryan Paget, our own AVP for Student Success, who will moderate the panel. Let's get it going. Thank you.
Good morning. Now, we like to say there's a whole bunch of planning that goes into something like this. And the one thing that we planned really well was the weather, because we had 3 people traveling today. So the fact that it's the middle of January and we had no snow and ice worked really well for us. So you're welcome for that. So we'd like to thank our panelists for agreeing to be here and to participate in this conversation. Over the next 25 or 30 minutes, we'll engage in a little bit of dialogue. And then at the end, we're going to save about 5 minutes for questions and answers from you, the audience. So if something piques your interest during these conversations, make sure you kind of keep that in the back of your mind so that afterwards we'll turn the microphones over to you so you can ask our panel those questions. So, we ready to begin?
Ready.
So I'd like to begin the conversation actually with a quote. In how we oversee institutions and student success, EAB states, quote, "Some say that the traditional student no longer exists. To ensure that all students persist and graduate, be they first generation, part-time, adult, or quote-unquote traditional, schools must reimagine the care models, experiences, structures, and technologies they provide," end quote. They continue on by highlighting the need to eliminate barriers to completion, intervene with students who are off the path to completion, and coordinating cross-campus initiatives. So I'd like to start by asking, how have you seen the landscape of higher education change over the last 10 years with regards to how we support students? Turn it over to anybody who wants to start us off.
Let me jump in?
Sure.
Okay, great. Ryan, thank you. And thank you to President Vaidya and your team for launching this inaugural Student Success Summit. It's exciting, it's inspiring for those of us in the state watching what's happening at our universities. And I think it's a model for others across the state as well. So thank you for having us here today. NKU is home for me, so this feels like coming home. I'm a product of NKU. I wouldn't be where I am today if it were not for the support that I received from NKU as a student, and in particular the support and the belief in me that I received from professors that I interacted with. So this is feels a bit like a homecoming for me, and I think underscores the importance of those relationships. And to exactly your question, Ryan, I think those relationships are ever more important as we think about first-generation students and students historically underserved by our systems, what they need. Yes, they need the rigor and they need the opportunity to achieve at a high level and to pursue their own area of interest. Oftentimes they need help identifying that area of interest because they've had limited exposure to the potential that higher ed can offer to them. So I think relationship has always been, continues to be, and may be ever more important today for students seeking out a college degree. The conversation has changed over more than the last decade. Over the last generation, we've really been in an environment where it's college for all. And that's a good thing. It's required by our economy, but it was a shift. And so I think, unfortunately, over time, we have ill-prepared many of our high school students for what it will take for them to compete and achieve in the college environment. And so it requires those additional supports and those additional relationships that much more. It also requires the counseling support both at the high school level and at the college level to help students identify the path that is right for them. The other thing that I think, particularly over the last 10 years, and I think you all know this better than I know through the lens of my own children and watching other students, but in the last 10 years, as our young people have watched what happened through the Great Recession, they've watched what happened to their peers slightly older than them. They have a lot of fear about debt, a lot of fear about making the wrong choices, a lot of fear about doing the right thing but it not paying off for them. And so again, I think that brings us back to the importance of the relationship and the counseling piece to help students identify the right path for them, and what that means from a college perspective, whether it's a degree, some type of credential or certificate, and valuing all those paths that they might choose to pursue.
Let me also add my appreciation and opportunity to be on this stage, Mr. President. Certainly this brilliant concept, student innovation, clearly tied to success. My northern connection, real quickly. I was a student at Eastern Kentucky University back in the day. Then I was big in broadcasting news, and our rival school was Western Kentucky University, where my wife attended. And we met here in Northern Kentucky 30 years ago at a conference right here at NKU. So this has been a special place. So that's a true story. And it's sponsored by Diet Mountain Dew. Get the kick without the calories. I'm just different, man. I'm sorry. I'm just different. So let's engage. And I just want to build on a couple thoughts really in the past 10 years. I would say that what has changed from my perspective probably very significantly in many ways comes to varying stakeholders' expectation about higher education and the value of it has been more scrutinized, more deeply scrutinized from my perspective. One, don't know how to put a microphone. I'll project, worked in radio and television, meaning this. So there are some aspects of a conversation that starts a little uncomfortable when you say, you know, the adage, where you live by zip code determines the resources, the access, the level of preparation. My wife was really big with K-12 at the Family Resource Centers. She would tell you that in Paducah, Kentucky, when we were there prior, the night and day difference between the level of student preparation, literally just in the same, 10 miles apart, just the difference. The second piece, I guess, a little tricky by way of the so-called traditional students. All high schools are not created equally by way of expectations and resources. So it isn't a magic trick. So in many ways, students then show up on the higher ed doors with, you know, incredible grades, GPAs, some with great ACT scores, but what shows up under the, rightfully so, the rigor of college is really that discrepancy. So I would offer that that is one important prism that still needs to be addressed within itself. I believe the second, by way of expectations, particularly in the community and technical college world, we engage a lot with business and industry. Some business leaders, today is Friday, they would meet with you and say, hey, I need a skilled workforce. They want them by Monday or Tuesday. It doesn't happen that fast, right? There's a preparation and a rigor associated with what we do in higher education. And then third, and certainly not least, there's a continuous balancing act, I believe, with just as a culture, how we approach education. It was not that long where if students opted to come to the community technical colleges, some people just saw us as glorified high schools, and not necessarily, on par with our peers. And so that constant engagement with, or guidance counselors, parents, and their expectations, the notion in terms of that all students need to go on a particular track. So we really, with intention, try to broaden that discussion. It isn't one versus the other. It should always be both, by way of options, with clear guided pathways of success. My last piece is, when all is said and done, ultimately, the cost of education, the barriers, I'm sure that we'll be expanding about, historically on some level has always been there, but I would argue that they've accelerated rather significantly, particularly in the last 10 years.
Thank you. I'm also very pleased to be with you all, and I want to thank the entire community and the presidents for inviting me and engaging with you all. I can't beat that I met my husband at NKU, but what I can say is that my husband attended NKU, and he was here for about 2 years, and he likes to say that he's just like George Clooney. And I tell him, I think that's where the comparison ends, that you both, as lovely as he is. What I would say, and underscore what you all talked about, but I would also add that I think in the last 10 years, as it relates to student success, is this entire increase of data analytics. And how do you use data analytics to create the kind of environment and the right network in order for students to persist and graduate. Students in this generation, and I would say even non-traditional students, all of us have a much more strong desire and just need for a more customized experience on whatever we do. And so the use of data analytics to meet the students where they currently are, meet the students where they have their current needs. A lot of times we think about a customized experience as it relates to like an Amazon experience, but that has translations in terms of how we help students navigate and utilize the resources that are available to them. So I think that's one of the biggest growth areas in the last 10 years is how we use data analytics to kind of customize the experience, which is really important as resources become more and more scarce, and you have to be more efficient on how do you deploy those resources accordingly to the students who have certain needs and tailor to those needs.
Perfect, thank you. And I think we can give the microphone back to President Reese, because I think your lapel's working just fine, okay. So I think we're gonna be good. So through these conversations, we heard some references to high school. So I'd like to throw a table up onto the screen for us. And so many of you have seen this table. We affectionately call it the leaky pipeline, and I'll walk you quickly through it. So what you see here on your left are the Commonwealth of Kentucky, as well as 3 other neighboring states, as well as national data. And what this is showing is that for every 100 ninth graders on average that enter high school, about 3/4 of them, 75, will graduate from high school. So before we even get through high school, we lose about 1/4 of our students who don't graduate. Of those 100, less than half will actually enter college. Of those half, and even from that 100, only about 1/3 will go into their sophomore year of college. And when we look at it in total, of those 100 ninth graders that entered high school, less than 1 out of 5 in Kentucky will graduate from college within 6 years. And so we talked to you guys referenced the importance of that collaboration, especially between high school and college. So while we have all seen college enrollments fluctuate due to the changing market, as well as student enrollment behaviors, universities still have a responsibility to shore up this pipeline, both pre-college and through to graduation. So to that end, what is one issue your institution still struggles with, and what are you doing about it?
Maybe
we'll go the opposite way.
Sure. Well, I will hit again on financial affordability that's already been brought up on the panel. But that, I'm at the University of Kentucky, and that is a major barrier for students is in terms of do they have enough money, and even if they have enough money to make ends meet, often that's at a cost of working not just one but multiple jobs, and the impact that that has on their persistence and their ability to actually really have the collegiate experience, really spend some time. It's one thing to be able to kind of go through it. It's another thing to spend some time in the life of the mind and figure out what you want to do and move forward. So what we've done at the University of Kentucky is look at what we call financial stability in our students. It's one of several major anchor initiatives that we have on the campus as it relates to student success. But we've called it UK Leads, and it's an umbrella initiative that looks at financial stability, thinks about the way that we deploy our institutional aid budget. Higher ed writ large has been in a merit aid arms race for the last about 15 to 20 years, where lots and lots of institutions, this isn't just private institutions, this is across the landscape, are giving more and more of their money to merit aid. And so we've been trying to rethink the way that we deploy the money that we have at UK and shift it to not only need-based aid, but also thinking through those two concepts aren't mutually exclusive. And a lot of times we think of them as a binary. It's either merit or need-based. But lots of students who have need are also meritorious. And so how can we rethink the way that we deploy that? One of those sub-components of that anchor initiative is a program that we've piloted called the one-time grants, and our data has shown us that students who have more than $5,000 of unmet need are less likely to persist regardless of the academic profile that they have. So if we had a chemistry major who was getting a 3.8 GPA and another chemistry major who was also getting a 3.8, but one had $5,000 unmet need and the other one didn't, the one with $5,000 unmet need is less likely to persist. In a perfect world, we would like to erase their need completely if we had unlimited resources. But what we've learned is if we can get students under that $5,000 unmet need threshold, they can move forward. They really get troubled and trumped up if they get past that 5,000. So we've been trying to get that target. Ideally, we'd like to wipe it out completely, but we've had great success if we could lower it to under that.
I think instinctively, even as I sit, that it is a continuous work in terms of how we impact the culture of expectations on our campus. Let's start first with students. There's still tension between the students who we have versus the students we wish that we had. Meaning that some would prefer that the students come game ready. I mean, who would not, right? That students are fully prepared, they get engaged, they utilize the resources, they stay on track, and they graduate on time. That's the ideal. But unfortunately, it is not the reality. So one aspect too, by way of, as you mentioned, the data analytics, is that the more that we can get really great context around students and the nuances around some of the barriers and challenges that they bring, then that puts our staff and faculty in the position, I believe, to, in my words, customize, adapt, and modify to meet some of those needs. I believe on the faculty side, surely we want to continuously push high expectations and the associated rigor. The question becomes then, is there flexibility and adaptability within the pedagogy of meeting students at various levels of progress academically? Because as you show that progress, your freshman year to your sophomore year is huge because it sets the foundation. But as you progress, and granted so, the rigor increases. But you have to have solid foundational skills. And certainly within some of the STEM disciplines, as an example, the math requirement may be higher or the science requirement. So there's a different nuance there, as you will. So I think part of it is just continuously staying attuned around that culture of expectations and having those dialogues across disciplines is one of the things I would posit.
And And I'll just add from a slightly different perspective, since we're not an institution, the Pritchard Committee is an independent nonprofit founded by a group of citizens in the 1983 to improve education outcomes in Kentucky. They grew out of a Blue Ribbon Commission looking at quality in post-secondary education and released a report called In Pursuit of Excellence. So from our perspective, I think one of the things that we've really focused on that is part of the mismatch is really thinking deeply about a meaningful high school diploma. So we know students are not coming to college really prepared to be successful and to embrace the rigor, the expectations, maybe even know the path that they want to be on. We know that starts in high school. And so the traditional model of high school works for a subset of our learners. They're the ones who are most likely to probably persist in their first and second year of college and to move on because they're traditional academic lecture type learners. But many of our learners, and arguably the ones that we're losing along the way in high school, need something different. They need more access to learning through application. And they need that access to learn through application that supports mastering the standards that Kentucky has put in place. So how do we think more deeply about how we transform the high school environment and how we ensure that the diploma in and of itself is meaningful to a student? We know it's necessary in today's economy, but that it's not wholly sufficient for a young person to move on and be successful. So how do we think differently about that high school diploma so we don't lose them? How do we marry application and mastery of content in a way that is different and supports every individual's innate desire to learn? And that's often where we're losing students. A piece of that is also something that we don't assess in K-12 environments and arguably shouldn't in the traditional way. But they're the things that I think you all want to see in students, and certainly our businesses want to see in students. HR directors are looking for. And those are the things that we call 21st century skills or executive functioning. They're the problem solving, teamwork, creativity, communication. Those are the skills and competencies that we want to intentionally begin to develop in students in elementary school, middle school, high school, and that from my point of view, we want students to understand that's part of what they're developing along the way, and something that's expected of them to develop along the way are those skills and competencies. So we see a lot of mismatch in even our philosophy about education and the things that need to change to create a more holistic and value-add education pipeline, if you will, that results in better outcomes at the ultimate end point of post-secondary attainment. And then the ability to transfer all of those skills, because this should be a conversation for post-secondary as well. What really is a quality post-secondary degree? And those transferable skills should be part of our conversation over the lifetime.
Absolutely, and this is a perfect segue, because now we want to kind of turn that conversation is how can we as colleges and universities continue to support our students? So President Reese, in particular, and your most recent, because you are a multi-winner of one of the highest awards that community colleges can win, the Aspen Prize of Community College Excellence Award, West Kentucky Community and Technical College was recognized in part, and quote from them, exceptional culture to get faculty engaged in improving teaching and learning that has led to measurable improvements in student success, end quote. I would like to ask you first, then open it up to the panel. How have you seen faculty and staff take the lead in student success work in meeting the needs of the students?
Well, as a 4-time top 10 ranked institution by Aspen and 4 times by Bellwether as well, one can argue if you do it once, that's luck. Twice is coincidence. Things happen in threes, but to do it on 4 occasions, maybe we're onto something. The criteria associated with Aspen in particular, though, does include the retention and success and completion rates of students. And the drill down is the diversity and equity. How do diverse students compare to majority students? That's another important evolution, I believe, in the top 10, in the past 10 years, and certainly this conversation in terms of meeting on top of everything else, how do we meet the cultural transitions as well? So this is where the data piece comes into play. We have really been intentional in really extrapolating and having cross-discipline conversations, reviewing the data in terms of the pass rates, particularly in those gatekeeper courses, you know, your maths, sciences. And then we have overloaded enough, been very intentional in putting quite a bit of money in success coaches. Different schools use different models. When I was at the University of Tennessee, over student success, you know, we used, in addition to tutoring, supplemental instruction was a big part of that. And there were students. At the West Kentucky, we use professional staff and faculty. And a big part of it is kind of like our recitation model. So students, of course, would attend lecture, but then outside of lecture, there's real intention in terms of then, you know, really revisiting the material and ensuring that we have coaches that look like the students, right? Because that's another challenge, right, for us. I can't emphasize enough how important it is, I believe. I don't have the science to prove it, but I believe that part of the formula for success in the community and technical colleges, you know, a heavy percentage of minority students, you know, start with us, if you will. But very often, very rarely do they see people certainly looking like me in certain disciplines, including those gatekeepers. So I'm very intentional in terms of having that representation there as well. So I think that that's a very important part of our success. Certainly community support, right? You know, as you were referencing the high school preparation, like several states now, 10 years ago, we started a community scholarship program where students could come specifically to West Kentucky Community Technical College tuition free. And so that was based on boosting the college preparation and success rates. So if you will, the caliber of students have increased significantly, and I think that adds to our success with Aspen.
Another
and
component of affordability, absolutely.
Yeah, and affordability.
Yeah. Any others?
I'd say, so about 4 years ago, our president and the board of trustees put a pretty ambitious goal in front of us to raise our retention and graduation rates to a significant level. We had been stalled out at a certain level for about 10 years on those, and despite lots of efforts, lots of kind of fits and starts of initiatives, I think there was something called the war of attrition for a while, and there were all sorts of different ways the institution was trying to address these things. We did kind of a radical look at as business as usual. So 4 years ago, we embarked on about a $4 million reinvestment. So we took existing money, this was not new money. We knew we weren't going to get money from the state, things of that nature. And we redeployed about 400 FTE staff around retention and graduation issues. And we combined our undergraduate education arm, which is an academic arm, with our student affairs arm to create a new unit called Student Academic Life. And what we said before we did any of that were, what are the reasons why our students don't persist? And we bucketed it into 4 different, what we call the 4 pillars of student success. And they're not unsimilar to your all's by design, because this is national information and national literature, and students, although there are incremental differences and discrete differences on campuses, the 4 main areas won't surprise you that we chose, which were academic issues around academic preparation and academic ability to maneuver and navigate the institution, financial stability, which I've already talked about to some degree, belonging and community. Do the students feel like they fit at our institution? Do they feel safe? Do they feel like this is a place where they have friends and that they belong there? And then the last pillar is health and wellness, and we've touched on that as well, but thinking about our students' mental health, their physical wellness. We know that this is a national issue across the entire population. So what we did is we took all the different retention initiatives on campus that had been evolved over time during those 10 years prior, and we cataloged them against those 4 pillars to see, are we doing what we should be doing, and are we deploying our monies and our resources appropriately? And there were over 800 initiatives. Some were micro, little initiatives that were targeting a subpopulation, and some were pretty massive. And we said, and we looked at them across those 4 pillars and said, okay, we've got a lot in one area, but nothing over here, and how are we going to do that? So we had to sunset some of those programs, a lot of those programs, and that was hard, because people were doing good work. We called it islands of effort. People were doing really good, hard work, but it was completely unconnected and not really under a strategy, and it was very discrete. And then what we did is we redeployed those resources across what we call anchor initiatives. So if you think of like an anchor store in a mall, and each year we layer on another anchor initiative to see if we can't move those numbers forward. It wasn't pleasant. These are deeply committed people and programs to this effort, but we knew that we were going to have to do something differently if we were going to make any headway, because it had been 10 years and we've been pretty stalled. And so in any time of change in anywhere, but particularly in higher education, it can be difficult. But 4 years hence, we've got some wind on our backs because we've seen progress. We've seen those numbers move. We've got more and more people coming to the table. But it's taken a lot of conversation for faculty and staff to work together and to move forward.
And that's great to hear. What I would argue the necessity for that collaboration across campus to see some of those accomplishments.
Yeah, because students don't come into an institution understanding the silos, or that they see one institution.
Exactly
and
right.
so you have to collaborate, because that, from their perspective, it's all on the same team.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So we have just a few minutes left before we turn it over to the audience for their questions. But we have kind of maybe one last question, if you'd like. So talked about collaboration, and then talked about some of those accomplishments. So I'd like to ask then, from your institution's perspective, or the Pritchard Committee's perspective, what has been the greatest student success accomplishment that you've seen? How did you achieve it? And what I believe to be equally important, what lessons did you learn through that implementation, as we as a university are about to implement in full Success by Design?
Let me jump in with, so it started at the University of Tennessee, and I brought that with me to West Kentucky Community Technical College. One of the areas that institutions are continuously challenged with are the students who ultimately end up on probation and being suspended. Sometimes our processes work against us, right? So specifically, what I brought to the table, the acronym was SOAR, Second Opportunity for Academic Recovery. Typically, students who get suspended had to leave the institution for a year, go to a community college, this is when it was at UT, and then come back. I argue that once students leave our doors, the odds of them coming back are very, very, very slim. So repackage it where during the summers, students will come back, and it will be kind of like a combination of where we will look, first of all, at students with a 1.7 to a 2.0, so that there was a reasonable possibility for them to, really repair the areas that they were deficient in. And then we put them through the paces with a real aggressive combination of some of our top instructors teaching, again, and it was primarily the gatekeeper courses, that type of thing. And then they'll be advising students how to have a parallel plan, because, sometimes where students start out or aspire to be may not necessarily landing up, where they are academically. And then at the end of the summer, we would post-test those students, and then based on those results, then look at the GPA, and we were able to recover about 68% of students who would have been suspended. Yeah. And so I brought a modified version of that as well to the community technical colleges.
I would say that's a great accomplishment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Others?
I would say just seeing those numbers move, because we always say that those numbers are just a proxy for a person and a family and a community. I believe you all are around 50% first gen, UK is around 30%, and we are located in a poor state. So thinking about how we can get more students to cross that stage and go on, as our president says, to leave lives of meaning and purpose. And so every time I see those numbers, I know that one percentage point in our retention rate is 50 students. So that's 50 lives that you're keeping to move forward. And when we see that our unmet need is the lowest it's been since 2013, and we see more and more students, that fills me up with really good hope about what we can do for this state and for the Commonwealth, and what we can do for those families. It changes the trajectory of their life, and the community of their life, and the downline. So that's been the biggest for me.
So at the Pritchard Committee, we've been at this shared vision for Kentucky's future for almost 4 decades. And so we're not in the direct service space. But what we've seen as far as student success goes is from the 1980s to today, Kentucky's risen from the bottom of the national rankings in nearly every indicator of education and quality of life to roughly the middle, depending on what indicator you look at. One of the ones that we've been particularly proud of in the last 6, 7, 8 years, as an example, is 4th grade reading and math proficiency, where on NAEP, Kentucky was 8th in the nation a few years ago. Unfortunately, we're beginning to see not only a plateauing of our progress as a state, but a decline. And again, going back to 4th grade reading proficiency on NAEP, we've fallen from 8th in the nation to 21st in the most recent NAEP results that came out last fall. So we're raising the flag, we're sounding the trumpet that unless Kentucky commits once again to excellence with equity for each and every one of our students in a state that is still 5th from the bottom of the nation in poverty, we will not continue to make the progress that can and should be in honor to the generation that made the progress we're now benefiting from. So we're underscoring a great deal of urgency and a call to action, and as part of that call to action, particularly in the post-secondary space, recognizing that our longest border state of Tennessee is reinvesting in higher education by double digits at the same time that Kentucky is still cutting higher education. We've called on our legislature with what we're calling a big, bold ask. And that big, bold ask is $1 billion increased investment in education, early childhood through post-secondary, over the next 6 years. So by 2026, an additional $1 billion, with about a third of that going directly to post-secondary, to increase Kentucky's progress. Thank you. It sounds like a big number. It is a big number. It is completely doable, and I'm here to tell you it's doable. So with the natural growth in the general fund, our tax structure in the state, that natural growth would allow for this additional investment. Now that means the legislature may need to get a second job for some of the other areas that have been underfunded in years and now create unfunded liabilities. But that big, bold ask is over the next 6 years, completely doable, a third going to post-secondary, because we know the nearest term impact we can have in our state to change the trajectory of lives, stabilize families and communities that then pay dividends in the early childhood and the K-12 space, is to ensure that more Kentuckians benefit from a marketable degree or certificate, and that we increase our post-secondary attainment rate to and beyond the national level. And we can do that in this next generation because we have proof of concept that Kentuckians can do it because of the last generation. Climbing from the bottom of the national rankings to roughly the middle is no small task, and Kentuckians did it. As part of that, we engage communities across the state. We mobilize citizens around a shared vision. And so we launched this past year an effort to revitalize that citizen mobilizing part of our work under something called the Groundswell Initiative, where we are actively supporting and encouraging folks to become involved in the Groundswell Initiative, to be that voice for Kentucky's progress, that voice for a belief in Kentucky, and the voice for the investment that we need to move ourselves forward with respect to education. So if anybody in the room would like to be part of that citizen-led initiative, just simply go to Groundswell Pritchard Committee on the internet and you'll find us. And President Vidya knows how to find me.
Let me just say this for 30 seconds to compliment the Pritchard Committee, because I read an article with that position. There is no question in my mind that education is the single most transformative element in society. And even for us on stage and certainly in the audience, we can attribute in our life trajectory the role that education played. But it's an awkward history, not exclusive to Kentucky, by the way, but it's an awkward history that when it comes to cutting, unfortunately, education comes under the knife. And it's counter to what is needed. Obviously, ultimately, this all points to careers, jobs, right? Economic development. So it's this really interesting continuous quandary. Why cut? Why touch the very vehicle that is needed to really push the Commonwealth to that upper tier? Is a head scratcher, I think, for all of the leaders, both on stage and in the audience.
In an agricultural state, you don't eat your seed corn, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's definitely been an argument for CPE as well for us.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely. So we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions for our panel. We hope somebody has a question, so not 300 or 400 faces are just looking at us. So if anybody has a question, we have some floating mics. Oh, we got one right there.
So you talked about creativity, collaboration, communication, problem solving as being the basis for strengths in students so that they can be successful. Technology is a driver for that. What have any of you done to address the digital inequities that we see in K-12 and still again in post-secondary, where students don't have access either to the devices, the computing devices, or to the internet to do their work and do it well and become digital citizens?
I can take that. So we've been working with Apple for the last about 18 months to 24 months, and we launched an initiative last spring and then beginning this fall, where the incoming class of this year, every single student received an iPad. And we did that for the exact reason that you're suggesting, is that we wanted to wipe out any sort of economic barrier around technology. And we are progressing forward that every single class going forward will also get an iPad. We are working with Apple right now to develop an app around student success that will be loaded this coming summer on everyone's iPad. As well, when they received it, they had a suite of student success apps as well. We then deployed it across different first-year courses. We did an RFP with our faculty to get early adopters into it. We knew that when we handed out the iPad last summer at summer orientations that it wasn't going to revolutionize the teaching and instruction overnight. We see this as a 4 to 5, 6-year change in the way that we deliver content and the way that the students interact with it. But at the core is what you were saying, is level that technology playing field, but also inspiring them in terms of creativity, helping them to be more efficient in terms of note-taking and things of that nature, and then using this our own app that we're developing, but then a suite of apps so that every student has access to that. So that's one way we've tried to do it.
I would just quickly add from this perspective, so access to technology is the bigger challenge that we face in the West, particularly in the rural areas. If you're familiar with the western part of the state, once you leave Paducah, Mayfield, Marshall area, and you get into the Hickman, Fultons, Ballards, it is as though you went back in time 20 years because of the incredible rural nature of it. So on our end, we try to add some technology in areas that still have public libraries, the GED testing, some of the GED locations that we've opened up, but those only go so far. I know even in the conversation with things like 5G, et cetera, well, those areas, you can't get 1G, right? So, and I know in the past there have been some attempts. I think it was called Kentucky Wired, maybe, and this cleared some challenges. But the concept is important. How do you get the 120 counties, broadband ready to be able to provide access, through online courses and that type of thing. So that is still a real issue, not exclusive for the West, but certainly throughout our state.
Absolutely. And because of time, we're actually going to go ahead and cut it off right there so we can take a little bit of a break before we head into the Innovation Challenge. Our panelists will be here for the Innovation Challenge, so in between, I'm sure if you have a specific question for them, they'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. If you'll please join me, when we were preparing for this, and even right before we walked in here, we were kind of doing a quick briefing on kind of the setup and everything. I said, just as a friendly reminder, we're looking for honest and transparent answers. And every single one of them said, that's why we're here. That's what it's about. And it's nice to see that, we're not alone in trying to solve the student success problem. We really are in this all together. So to get some ideas and some nuggets as we move forward with the implementation of Success by Design, I think some of these ideas are something that resonate and we can run with. So with that, if you all join me in an applause in thanking our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we would like to welcome to the stage President of IDEA. Please, go ahead.
Yes, very good. So I just want to add my thanks to all the panelists and Ryan for your hard work in getting everything coordinated. We, by design, didn't spend a lot of time giving an introduction. It's in your It's in your little program that you have in your seat, so you'll get a chance to look at all the wonderful work that our panelists have done, a little bit more information about the Pritchard Committee and what an asset it is for this Commonwealth. And as I said, obviously being new here myself, when I discovered about the good work that's happening, I figured, this notion of trying to bring national leaders into the conversation, let's look at all the good work that's happening right in our own backyard. Now, I'll admit, I didn't quite know where Paducah was when I extended my invitation to you, Dr. Reese, and then when I said, oh yes, Dr. Reese has agreed to come, and they said, you understand it's about 4 or 5 hours away, right? And I said, oh my goodness, but I want to thank all of you for taking the time, really inspiring conversations, and Ryan, to your point, it really does drive home the question. It is a national imperative, and the work that we're doing, we're not alone. It's also of consequence, of significance. It's something that we really have to continue to focus on with a great deal of intentionality. And every time I have these kinds of interactions, I learn something new, as I hope all of us did. So thank you again for your time and effort on this. And again, we are looking forward to your judging of the Innovation Challenge. What we're going to do now, folks, is just take a quick 10-minute break. Get yourself stretched out a little bit. I don't know if you still have coffee in the outside. We do, so quickly grab that and stretch your legs and arms a little bit. Come back, and then we'll get ready for the Innovation Challenge. Again, a big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.
That concludes the Student Success Summit. There will be a 10-minute break before the 2020 Innovation Challenge begins. Refreshments are available in the hallways outside of the ballroom. Thank you. See you back here in 10 minutes.